Online research was a mixed bag. I found the most insane conspiracy theories, essays, and propositions, which I could then use to incite heated debate on my radio show. Not just flat Earth, but cubed Earth, or strawberry ice cream eating aliens living at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, or a pseudo-scientific study claiming that vampire strippers make more in tips than mortal strippers because of their hypnotic powers. Vampire strippers? Really? And could I get one on the show for an interview? Or I could click through useless links for hours and feel like I've wasted a day. Sometimes I typed in my search request and found treasure. The image currently on my screen was a photograph of a statue called the Capitoline Wolf. The sculpture showed a rather primitive-looking wolf, with stylized, patterned fur, a glaring, snarling expression, and a couple of human babies suckling at rows of impressively bulging nipples. Housed in a museum in Rome, the age of the wolf portion of the statue was under some debate. Historically, it had been assumed that it was old, pre-Roman, Etruscan even, because of its stocky shape and decidedly non-classical features. Roman writers even made reference to a famous statue of a wolf that symbolized the founding of Rome, but modern dating techniques established the statue's origin in the late medieval period. The babies, fat and cherubic in Renaissance detail, had obviously been added later, in the 15th century. Wherever it came from, whenever it was made, the statue depicted the legend of the founding of Rome, the she-wolf who discovered the abandoned brothers, Romulus and Remus, and saved their lives. They went on to found the great city of Rome. The statue was so iconic that copies of it could be found all over the world. That was the official, published, accepted story of the Capitoline Wolf. However, I had my own ideas. Other details about the statue intrigued me. For example, the wolf wasn't life-size, but it was a bit larger than a female wolf living in that part of the world would be. An average female wolf would weigh about 75 pounds, give or take 10 pounds. A wolf the size of this statue might weigh, 110 pounds or so, the weight of a small woman. Shapeshifters obeyed the law of conservation of mass. A 200-pound man becomes a 200-pound wolf. 130-pound me becomes a 130-pound wolf. A 200-pound werebear becomes a really small bear. I'd never actually seen a werebear in bear form, so I didn't know what that looked like. Whether I wanted to see what that looked like depended on the temperament of the bear. When I read about the Capitoline Wolf, learned about the dimensions of the statue, made a mental comparison to the werewolves I'd met in both human and wolf form, my heart beat a little quicker. My journalistic instincts for a good story sang out, because I wondered then if the story of Romulus and Remus had some basis in reality, and I wondered about the werewolf who'd rescued them. This was all the fruit of a pointed line of research that steered me in the direction of the Capitoline Wolf. I'd heard a phrase, Regina Luporum, Queen of the Wolves. According to an ancient vampire I'd met, the story of Romulus and Remus was real. The mother werewolf was real. The Capitoline Wolf, the foster mother of the founders of Rome, had been the original queen of the wolves. I'd been told this label was used to describe werewolves who defended their kind when few others did, who spoke out and stood up for what was right. A couple of times lately, I'd been called Regina Luporum. It wasn't a title I claimed for myself or thought I deserved. I was half of the alpha pair of the Denver werewolf pack, which was small, unassuming, and generally sedate, as werewolf packs went, because my husband Ben and I worked hard to keep it that way. On the other hand, publicly and professionally, I had a big mouth. I talked too much. That didn't make me queen of anything. The statue might have been made in the 13th century, belying the tradition and ancient references that said it had stood watch in Rome from the beginning. But that didn't mean it might not be a copy of an earlier piece that had been destroyed. Maybe copies of the statue had been made over and over to ensure that some memory of the events it memorialized lived on,